What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to read some horrifying / disturbing horror stories, which you can listen while studying, trying to sleep, or just want to chill. I'd really appreciate if you guys subscribe and like the video. It'll really help me a lot. I'm sure y'all gonna love these stories. This is a long video, so let's just get right into it. My local radio station has been announcing people's names for a while now. I just found out what it meant. For as long as I can remember, WLNK 97.3, The Link, has been the local radio station in my town. It's one of those stations that plays a little bit of everything. Old rock, some pop hits, even a few talk shows when the ad money dries up. Everyone listens to it. You know, that kind of station that's always on in the background at diners, garages, and grocery stores. I'd been a casual listener my whole life. It was dependable, familiar, safe. But all of that changed 3 months ago, the night I noticed something I can't explain. Something no one else seems to believe, no matter how many times I try to tell them. It started on a Monday night. I'd been driving home late from work, flipping between stations, when I landed on WLNK. I wasn't paying much attention, just another evening commute. The DJ was wrapping up a song, probably something by Fleetwood Mac, when he cut to his usual banter. And now, the name of the night, he said, his voice dropping into a strange, almost playful tone. There was a pause, static buzzing faintly in the background. Then, with eerie clarity, the DJ said a single name. Jessica Browning. It felt odd. There was no context, no explanation, just a name dropped into the ether like a stone into still water. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was part of a contest or some weird new segment, but I couldn't shake the way it felt. The delivery was too strange, too deliberate. I forgot about it until the following Monday. I was driving again, same time, same station, when the DJ did it again. And now, the name of the night. This time, the name was Robert Sanchez. Another pause. Another song. The pattern continued every Monday at exactly 11:05 p.m. One name, no explanation, just dropped into the void. By the 5th week, curiosity had gotten the better of me. I started listening religiously, notebook in hand. Each Monday night, I'd jot down the name, and each week, I'd search social media, local news sites, anything that might explain what this segment was about. At first, I found nothing. No contests, no winners, no mentions of the names anywhere. But then something changed. One week, the name was Caleb Howard. It stuck with me because Caleb worked at the gas station near my apartment. We weren't friends or anything, but I'd chatted with him a few times while paying for coffee or snacks. He was a nice guy, always had a smile on his face. I didn't think much of it until a week later, when I stopped at the gas station and saw a "Help Find Caleb" poster taped to the door. The clerk behind the counter, a college kid with a nervous energy, told me Caleb had just disappeared after his shift. No one knew where he'd gone. His car was still in the parking lot. I couldn't believe it. Caleb's name had been said on WLNK exactly a week before. I told myself it was a coincidence, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I started digging. I went through the names I'd written down in my notebook and searched for any trace of them. By now, I had 6 names, including Caleb's. 3 of them, Jessica Browning, Robert Sanchez, and Caleb Howard, were confirmed missing. Their faces stared back at me from articles and social media posts, plastered with desperate pleas from friends and family. No one else seemed to see the pattern. I tried asking people about the radio show, but everyone looked at me like I was crazy. A few people said they listened to WLNK, but none of them had noticed the Name of the Night segment. Some even insisted it didn't exist. I couldn't explain it. How could a radio broadcast that I heard every week leave no trace? By the time the 8th name was announced, I was obsessed. The name was Emily Carter. I didn't know her personally, but a quick search on social media turned up her profile. She was 28, lived on the other side of town, and worked as a veterinary assistant. Her posts were filled with photos of smiling dogs and cats, each caption brimming with positivity. I couldn't let her vanish like the others. I sent her a message. It was awkward, clumsy. Hi, you don't know me, but I heard your name mentioned on a radio station. It's hard to explain, but I think something bad might happen to you soon. Please be careful. She didn't reply. Over the next week, I checked her profile obsessively. She posted like normal. Pictures of her dog, updates from work, jokes about her favorite TV shows. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Then, exactly 7 days later, her post stopped. I knew what that meant. The next morning, I saw a news article. Local veterinary assistant reported missing. She was gone. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. I started visiting WLNK's building after hours, trying to figure out who was behind the segment. The station was housed in an old, nondescript building downtown. I watched it for hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of the DJ, or anyone who might know about the names. Nothing. On a whim, I tried calling the station during the day. The receptionist who answered sounded confused when I asked about the 11:05 broadcast. "We don't have anything like that on our schedule," she said. "Are you sure you're listening to WLNK?" "Yes," I insisted. "It happens every Monday night." Then, quietly, she said, "We don't have live programming at that time." Last Monday, the name was Brandon Lewis. I found him online, a local contractor with a wife and 2 kids. I didn't bother messaging him this time. No one ever believed me. Instead, I decided to confront the source. At 10:30 p.m., I parked outside WLNK. The building was dark except for a single light on the second floor. I waited, heart pounding, until 11:05. When the time came, I heard it, the muffled sound of the broadcast through the building's walls. And now, the name of the night. I burst through the door. Inside, the station was eerily silent. The reception desk was empty, the hallways dark. I followed the faint sound of the DJ's voice up a flight of creaky stairs to the second floor. At the end of the hallway, a door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the corridor. I pushed it open. The room was empty, just an old desk, a microphone, and a tangle of outdated broadcasting equipment. The light on the on-air sign flickered weakly, and the static-filled voice of the DJ continued. "Brandon Lewis." I stepped closer, and the equipment suddenly shut off. The room plunged into silence. Then I saw it. Taped to the wall behind the desk was a list of names, written in neat, looping handwriting. My heart stopped when I saw the last entry. Ethan Grant. That's my name. It's been 6 days since that broadcast. I've locked myself in my apartment, every door and window sealed. The phone rings sometimes, but I don't answer it. Tomorrow is day 7. If anyone hears this, if anyone knows what's happening, please don't let them say another name, because no one ever comes back. All right, guys, this is the reply to the story by someone on Reddit. This actually happened, sort of, in my hometown. We had a single local radio station, and the DJ who did the show was fucked in the head. People went missing every now and then here, and it turns out that he was kidnapping them. He had a segment where he'd just tell a story, usually something random with a simple moral, but he put in the person's name of who he was going to kidnap into the story exactly 4 nights before he kidnapped them. I hope you get out of this safely, Ethan. My brother called me from the hospital while he was sitting in my car. Blake and I hadn't spoken in almost 17 years. He was the older one, 6 years older than me. He always treated me like a kid. And our parents, well, how should I put it? I think he hated them. When our father died, Blake said flat out that he wouldn't come to the funeral. He didn't want to hear about any of it. He screamed at our mother, and he told me to go to hell too, for always taking our parents' side, even though, according to him, they didn't deserve it. I was angry with him for a long time. When Blake turned 18, he left home, and I was left alone with our mother. Her condition slowly got worse. I took care of her for 10 years, and when I was 22, she died too. It was horrible. I loved my parents, and losing both of them pulled me into a deep, dark place. But the worst part was Blake's behavior. When I called him to tell him that our mother had died, He only said she deserved it. I was furious with Blake. He didn't even come to her funeral. I couldn't reach him afterward either. Maybe that was for the best. It would have been nothing but arguing and chaos anyway. But when I was at the lawyer's office, handling our parents' will, Blake showed up. I snapped. I went after him like a madman. I insulted him in every way I could, right there in the lawyer's office. I threw everything I had at him, asking how he could be such an asshole. Our parents had raised us properly. They had done everything for us. And this is who he turned out to be? Blake didn't react to any of it. He was completely indifferent to my insults. He said he wasn't there for the money or our parents' estate. There was only one thing he cared about: selling the house we grew up in. Selling it to someone who had promised to tear that filthy place down to the ground. That's when I completely lost it and attacked him. We got into a violent fight. The police showed up and... yeah, the whole situation turned out pretty ugly. But that was a long time ago. The house was sold and Blake disappeared. I thought I would never hear from him again. I didn't even think when my phone rang. I was waiting for a package anyway, so I assumed it was the courier or something like that. But when I picked up, a familiar voice spoke on the other end. "Hey, little brother," Blake said. Even after all these years, my stomach clenched. A whole world, a whole life I thought I had left behind came crashing back. Hearing Blake's voice through the phone made everything echo inside me. I talked to Blake then. Part of me felt like I should just hang up and tell him to go to hell. But he was my brother. Maybe it was time to forgive him after all these years. 6 months passed. Blake and I talked every week. You could say he'd grown up. Well, maybe. I'm not sure. Talking to Blake brought up a side of our parents I had never known. To them, I had always been their sweet little Max. They loved me. They took care of me. In my memories, Blake had received that same love. Our family had been a decent, honest, loving home. But Blake remembered things differently. When he first told me, I thought he was losing his mind again, trying to drag our parents' names through the dirt. But he insisted they had starved him, that they had done terrible things to him. He said there were times they locked him in the basement for days, tied him up, and wouldn't even let him use the bathroom, so he had no choice but to soil himself. And if that wasn't enough, they punished him constantly. Our mother beat him with a leather belt almost every day. Our father preferred to choke him until he passed out. I didn't believe him. Not until, during a video call, he showed me proof. His back, legs, and arms were covered in old scars, long marks, like he'd been whipped. One of the joints on his index finger was missing. He said our father had cut it off with pruning shears when he was around 10 years old. Blake was a tortured man with a tortured soul. And finally, I understood why he hated our parents so much. But my own world was turned upside down too. The people I had loved, the people whose absence still hurt like hell, had treated their other, older child like monsters. How could I not have noticed any of it when I was a kid? My conversations with Blake didn't stop. We texted almost every day, and whenever we had time, we talked on the phone. But our childhood never came up again. Not because I didn't want to talk about it. On the contrary, I had 1,000 questions for Blake. Questions that could have put everything in order. Still, something inside me felt, or maybe decided, that it was better not to dig any deeper. It felt like, aside from Blake, nothing remained for me from that past. Our parents were gone. There was no one left to ask what really happened. No one to tell me whether Blake was telling the truth. I have to admit, that was what held me back the most. What if Blake was lying? 17 years is a long time. I had no idea where he'd been or what he'd done. He said he had lived in South Korea for a while. He'd had a family, but things hadn't worked out, and he was divorced now. He had a 14-year-old daughter. He even showed me a picture of her. But still, I don't know. What if he was lying? Why had our parents never hurt me? I couldn't hide my doubts forever. During one of our conversations, Blake asked why I'd been acting so strange lately. So I told him everything. Everything I felt and everything I was thinking. Surprisingly, Blake didn't get angry or defensive. Maybe it was because he was almost 50 years old now, not the furious teenager who had once hated our parents. Blake didn't explain any of it. He didn't argue or try to justify himself. He just said he wanted to come see me. That caught me off guard. He told me he was sick. He hadn't wanted to worry me, but there were problems with his heart. He wanted to see me while he still could, and to tell me everything in person. To explain why our parents had locked him in the basement for days, and what they had done to him there beyond the torture. I agreed. I can't even describe what I felt in that moment. Finding out the truth about your family at 42 years old? What is a person supposed to say? What are they supposed to feel? Blake booked a flight for 2 weeks later, and he asked just one thing of me: to pick him up at the airport. When the day came for me to go pick up Blake, everything hit me at once. Emotions I'd never felt before swirled inside me. I was afraid of meeting the brother I hadn't seen in almost 20 years, the brother I'd never had an easy relationship with. At the same time, a childlike excitement burned inside me, because it felt like Blake and I had never been this close before. I spent the entire morning pacing around the apartment, restless and on edge. My wife and kids were already going crazy from it. They had been for days, so eventually they told me to just go already and head to the airport. I had plenty of time. During the whole drive, I kept running scenarios through my head. What would I say when I finally saw Blake after all these years? How would I greet him? What would he tell me about our childhood? What did he know about our family that I didn't? I felt childish, yet all I could think about was what was going to happen. I was already waiting at the airport. According to the board, Blake's plane had landed. There had been a delay earlier, but thankfully it arrived on time in the end. I stood at the exit, nervous, waiting to catch my first glimpse of him. And when I did, that stubborn young man I hadn't seen in nearly 20 years, the one I'd last met in a fight so violent I ended up in the hospital, was now walking toward me in the body of an old man. He wasn't elderly, not really, but the years and everything he'd been through were etched into his face. Max. Blake stopped in front of me at the airport exit. It's been a long time, little brother. I thought I was going to cry right there. Nostalgia, emotion, everything hit me at once, harder than the flower pot Blake had smashed over my head back in the lawyer's office. But I didn't cry. What kind of sight would that have been? An old man breaking down in the middle of an airport? I swallowed hard, held back my tears, shook Blake's outstretched hand, and patted him on the shoulder. That's for sure, Blake, I said with a faint smile. Then I took his bag and we headed out to the parking lot. We talked the whole drive home. Nothing important, just talking, like two brothers finally acting like brothers. Blake was different from how I remembered him. He'd become an older man, calm and cautious. If he'd been like this when he was younger, maybe it wouldn't have taken so long for us to find our way back to each other. Max, Blake said after a short stretch of quiet driving, could you take me to our old house now? Right now? I glanced at him as I passed a slower truck. Yeah, I just want to get it over with, Blake said, his voice trembling. I nodded, feeling the weight of it. Ah, damn, I said suddenly. But Blake, I need to swing by home first. I left my work phone there. It's really important. Sure, Max, Blake nodded tiredly. But after that, please take me to the house. I pressed down on the gas. Our old house was far from where we were. If I went home first, I was looking at least a 5-hour drive. I parked in front of our apartment building and jumped out of the car. I'll wait here, Blake called after me. You'll be faster without me. Okay, I said, confused. But there's an elevator. You could come up." No, Blake waved it off. "We'd just get stuck. I want to see the house today." I nodded and rushed inside, up to the loft, straight to the apartment. My wife and kids weren't home, either grocery shopping or at the nearby bakery. They'd said they were picking up a cake for Blake's arrival. I scribbled a quick note saying we'd be home late, grabbed my work phone from the kitchen counter, and hurried back toward the elevator. My phone rang in my hand, and I immediately looked at the screen, hoping it was something important. It was Blake. The phone I'd brought with me was my personal one, not the work phone. I'd mixed them up. The work phone had been with me the entire time. "Blake?" I answered. "I'm coming. I'll be right there." "Where?" Blake asked, sounding exhausted. "Max?" "Down at the car, with you," I said, confused, as I stepped into the elevator. "Max," Blake continued, his voice tense. "I couldn't come to see you. I got sick this morning. I'm at the hospital. I've been calling you for hours." "What?" I said, stunned. "Max, I never got on the plane," Blake said sharply. "Blake, is this some kind of joke?" I said as I stepped out of the elevator. "You're sitting in my car. I'm coming right now, and then we're heading to Mom and Dad's house." "Max, listen to me," Blake coughed into the phone. "You can't take him back." "What?" I cut in, panic rising. Blake kept coughing, unable to continue. There was a clattering sound, like something being knocked over. "Max," he said again, his voice strained. "Max, my heart. Please, promise me. Promise me you won't take him back. He can't go back." Then there was a heavy thud on the line. "Blake?" I said, terrified. "Blake, are you okay?" There was no answer. I could hear voices in the background, doctors maybe. I heard equipment rattling and people shouting urgently. The call disconnected. My hands were shaking as I stepped outside through the front door. Despite the winter cold, I felt like I was about to burst into flames. I stared at my car, frozen in place. Blake was sitting inside. He was staring out the window, his eyes dull and unfocused. He just sat there, completely still, not even blinking. I stood there, unable to move. And then I saw his hand. The finger joint wasn't missing. The realization washed over me, cold and absolute. If that wasn't Blake sitting in my car, then who was it? And why did he look exactly like him? So guys, that was the story. Yeah, they left us with a cliffhanger, and there's no part 2 of the story. I don't know about the ending, but these are my theories. There are only 2 ways to explain this. First theory, the guy in the car wasn't Blake, because the real Blake never even made it onto that flight. He was in a hospital the whole time. So the person sitting next to Max, talking like him, acting like him, wasn't him. It was someone else. But not just some random guy. This dude knew all the personal stuff. The way Blake talked, his habits, his past. He knew enough to make Max believe it, but not enough to be perfect, because of one small detail. The finger didn't match. And that's where everything falls apart, because now it's obvious this wasn't Blake. It was someone who had been watching him, studying him, learning everything about him, but still missed something. And if that's true, then think about this. Why was he so desperate to get to that house? What was inside that made someone go this far? Because Blake's last words, "Don't take him back," that didn't sound like fear. That sounded like a warning. But then there's the second possibility. And honestly, this one's worse. Because maybe no one had to actually become Blake. Maybe all they needed was his identity. Think about it. The call came from Blake, but voices can be copied and numbers can be faked. So what if the voice on the phone wasn't him either? What if someone else was trying to interfere, trying to stop Max, or maybe mislead him? Now imagine this. Blake had a past, stuff he never talked about, people he never mentioned. What if someone from that past finally found him, and instead of showing up directly, they used him, his name, his voice, his identity? Now you don't have one fake Blake, you have 2. One sitting in the car trying to reach the house, the other on the phone trying to stop it. Two different people, two completely different intentions. And Max, he's stuck in the middle, confused, outplayed, and already too deep. So now, forget everything else. This is the only question that matters. What was in that house that made multiple people pretend to be the same man? And whatever it was it really worth finding? Or was it something that should have never been found at all? Memories of the Graveyard Shift. I was 18, just graduated high school. My dad had one rule. If you're living under my roof, you're working. No exceptions. I had about a week left before he made good on his threat, and I was out of options. Finding a job wasn't easy. Green hair, nose ring, lip ring, gauges, and a shaky stick-and-poke snake tattoo on my forearm that my 16-year-old self had done with a sewing needle at a sleepover. Most places took my application with that polite look that means no. And then, like some dark miracle, a cop got shot and killed out on 84th Avenue, pretty close to a gas station called the Pass and Go. The night shift opened up not long after. I was the only person desperate enough to apply. Now, 84th Avenue had a reputation. The road was barely paved past the gas station. It ran alongside a deep drainage ditch with no guardrails. People had been complaining about that for decades. Nothing ever got done. There was a sharp bend about a quarter-mile north of the station that came out of nowhere in the dark. No streetlights. A lot of people underestimated it over the years. Some walked away. Some didn't. In a small town, a road like that stops being a badly maintained road pretty quickly. It becomes cursed, haunted. People died out there because the road wanted them, not because the city couldn't be bothered to install guardrails. Your phone signal cut out because something was isolating you on purpose, not because you were 10 miles from the nearest tower. The woods past the ditch were worse. 3 bodies found out there since the turn of the century. 1 suicide, 2 shallow graves. For a small town, that's a lot. The only people nearby on a regular basis were the workers at the Pass and Go, who weren't being paid enough to notice anything. I filled out my application in my car with the engine running. The guy behind the counter looked at my hair, looked at my face, looked at the paper, and said he'd call me. He called the next day. The job was easy. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., mostly dead quiet. I was already a night person, so sleeping until 3 in the afternoon felt like a professional perk. My first week, I shadowed a guy I'll call Vic, because I never learned his real name. Vic was one of the blankest people I've ever met. Not mean, not stupid, just empty. He did the job in complete silence, never looked out the window, never paused, never seemed to have a thought that wasn't directly about completing the next task. Like something had been quietly removed from him over time. I remember thinking, half joking, that he looked like someone who'd seen too much. I didn't think it was funny for long. After a week with Vic, I was on my own. And at first, honestly, I liked it. The quiet suited me. I'd put something in my earbuds and zone out. Some nights were completely dead, hours without a single customer. Just me and the hum of the refrigerators and the buzz of the fluorescent lights. There was one thing I figured out on my own pretty early. The open sign in the front window, big red neon letters, would flicker sometimes. I used it as an alarm system. A stack of merchandise blocked my view of the parking lot, so when the sign flickered in my peripheral vision, I'd put the phone down and look like I was doing something. Simple. I had no idea what that sign was actually doing. About 2 weeks in, a cop walked through the door around 10:30 at night. Young guy, fresh haircut, sugar-free monster from the cooler. I made small talk to keep his attention away from the fact that I was stoned. It worked well enough. When he tapped his card and grabbed his drink, I said without really thinking, "Stay safe out there." He raised an eyebrow. "You know something I don't?" "Nah," I said. "Just that cop that got shot out here a few weeks ago." He stared at me. "Huh?" Not dismissive, actually confused. Like the words didn't parse. "Listen," he said, glancing at my name tag. "Carter. You can't believe everything you hear about 84th. It's just a street. Most of what people say about it is made up. I looked at his name tag. Brady. Sure, Officer Brady, I said. Have a good night. He walked out, got in his cruiser, and was gone. I stood there for a second. I was pretty sure I'd heard the story right. Cop shot on 84th, job opens, I apply, I get hired. But maybe the details got mixed up somewhere. I let it go. But I didn't forget him. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to the sign. Here's what I realized. It didn't flicker that often. Most customers came and went without it doing anything. But certain people, always the same ones, set it off every single time they came in. The clearest example was a woman who showed up about once a week, always between midnight and 2. She always wore the exact same clothes. Same jacket, same jeans, same sneakers with a scuff on the left toe. Not similar clothes, the same ones, in the same condition every time. She'd walk straight to the lottery display and ask for a Cash Kaiser scratch-off. $2. Every time. I'd slide it over, she'd look up at me with this tired, hopeful expression and say the same thing. Maybe tonight's the night. She never scratched the ticket in the store, always left in a hurry, always came back the next week. Same clothes, same words. Every single time she walked in, the sign flickered. I told myself there was an electrical explanation, some wires, some vibration, something. I don't know enough about electricity to rule it out, but I kept filing it away. Early July, quiet night. I was 2 hours into a dead shift when the sign flickered. I looked out at the lot. There was a truck at the far pump. Old, faded red, 2x4s in the back under a tarp. The guy filling it was somewhere between late 30s and 40. Big, gruff, heavy flannel, 5 o'clock shadow. He had a kind of weight to him, I noticed, before I could explain why. Walking toward the store was a girl about my age. Black hair, big brown eyes, pale skin, gray top. She came in and went straight to the snacks without looking at me. She came up to the counter with a red Gatorade and chips. It was almost 4 in the morning. "What's got you out so late?" I asked. "Nothing, really." "Big bro?" I nodded at the lot. Her nose wrinkled. "Ew, no." "Ew? It's gross to kiss your brother," she said flatly. I kept my voice even. I looked out at the man by the pump again. He was definitely not in his 30s. The age gap sat in my gut like something I didn't have a name for yet. "Road trip?" I asked. "Something like that." And something moved across her face. Excitement. Real excitement. But underneath it, this other thing. Like she was walking away from something she hadn't finished saying goodbye to. "You ever just do something totally crazy?" she asked. "Like, overnight, out of nowhere, you just decide to do something completely different?" "I took a heavy dose of shrooms once on a whim," I said. "No trip sitter. Turned out okay. Mostly." She laughed, a real one, and shook her head. "I didn't mean like that." She took her change and turned to go. And right then the urge hit me. This pressure of something that wanted to be a question, something real and direct. I could feel it. I let it pass. As the truck pulled out onto 84th and turned north, I looked at the passenger window one more time. It was gone. Not rolled down, gone. Open frame, night air coming right in. And she was sitting in that seat. They drove north and disappeared into the dark. Something was wrong. I'd felt it the whole time she was in the store. As I watched the taillights vanish, that feeling got a lot louder. But I went back to my podcast. Mid-July, the night everything cracked open. A motorcycle pulled into the lot. Loud, aggressive, engine pushed too hard. Big guy climbed off. Leather vest, heavy boots, very drunk. He braced against the counter when he came in. The sign was flickering. Menthols, Camel. "You okay, man?" "The fuck do you mean?" "You drove here on a motorcycle. You're wasted. Bad idea." Shut up and sell me the cigarettes. I grabbed the last pack, slid it over, didn't push it further. He threw cash at me, some on the counter, some on the floor, grabbed the pack, and shoved through the door hard enough to rattle it. I started picking up the money. I watched him through the window heading to his bike. And then the world went wrong. In the time it takes to blink, he changed. His head was caved in on one side. Not a bruise, caved in, structural. The kind of damage you don't walk away from. Teeth gone. Blood dried on his face and soaked dark into his jacket. His right arm hung at the wrong angle, bone visible under the skin. Every part of him scraped and raw. I stumbled backward, hit the shelf behind me, knocked the vape display off the counter, nearly slipped on the pens as they scattered. I grabbed the edge of the counter with both hands, heart pounding in my ears. He was still walking. And the bike? The bike was destroyed. Front end completely smashed, no headlight. Metal dark and wet, packed with mud like it had been underwater. That machine had no business moving. I didn't decide to go outside. I just went. Hey! I was shouting before I was fully through the door. Hey man, are you all right? He stopped. One leg over the bike and he just stopped. And he looked at me. Everything was gone. The hostility, the drunkenness, all of it. What was in his eyes instead was total, quiet clarity. Sober. Focused. And underneath it, this deep, settled sadness. Not the crying kind. The kind that's finished burning and is just ash now. The regret of someone who has completely run out of road and knows it. He held the look for a long moment. Then the destroyed bike roared to life, somehow, impossibly, and he drove north on 84th, and within seconds, both the engine sound and the taillights were swallowed by the dark. The sign went steady. I stood alone in the empty lot, chest heaving. Then I went inside, walked to the back room, sat down at the security monitor, rewound the footage 2 minutes, and watched myself react to a motorcycle in an empty parking lot. The lot was empty. No motorcycle, no man. Just me, leaning out past the merchandise, miming a transaction with nobody. Making change for empty air. Stumbling backward, wiping out the vape display. Running outside to scream into the night. I rewound it and watched again. Then again. Nothing. No shadow, no artifact. Just me and an empty lot. I sat back. Hands shaking. Then I looked at the footage one more time. But this time, I watched the window. The sign. From the moment I'd reacted to the sound of the motorcycle, the neon had been flickering. The entire interaction. And the exact second the bike disappeared north on 84th, it went steady. Instantly. Like a switch. I pushed back from the desk and pressed my hands flat on the surface and sat there in the quiet of the back room. And I started going back through every time that sign had flickered. The woman with the scratch-off ticket. Same clothes every single week, same condition, same scuff on the same shoe. Same $2 ticket. Same words. Maybe tonight's the night. And then back the next week, exactly the same. Because wherever she went after she left the pass and go, time wasn't moving the way time is supposed to move. She wasn't coming back every week. She was stuck in the same week, the same night, over and over, cycling back to the last place that had given her some kind of hope. She was always in a hurry to leave. She never scratched the ticket in the store. Maybe the scratch wasn't the point. Maybe the point was the moment just before it, the few seconds where it could still be the night, where tonight was still possible. Officer Brady, who'd had no idea what I was talking about when I mentioned the shooting, who told me 84th was just a street, who'd walked out of my store and driven away, and somewhere between the pass and go and wherever he was going, something had happened. Or was going to happen. Or was always happening every time he pulled into my lot. The girl with the brown eyes, heading north on 84th at 4 in the morning. Missing window. Older man. That look on her face aimed in 2 directions at once. The question she'd almost asked me. The thing I'd let her walk out the door without saying. I sat in that back room for a long time. Then I got up, walked back out to the counter, and stood there in the hum and the fluorescent light and looked out through the window at 84th Avenue disappearing into the dark. And I understood. The sign wasn't broken. It had never been broken. It was doing exactly one thing every time without fail. It was announcing the people who were already gone. Or who were on their way there. Or both. And maybe there's no real difference between those two things. It was a warning system. And I was the one standing in front of it. I kept working the job for 4 more weeks after that night. I tried to be more present for the people the sign announced. Not to fix anything. I couldn't fix anything. But I could actually look at them. Say something real. Make sure whoever came through that door didn't pass through completely unseen. The scratch-off woman came back twice. Same clothes, same words. The second time, I said a few more things than I usually did, asked her something honest. She was a little more open. When she left, she smiled at me differently. Less like a mask, more like something that meant something. Officer Brady came back once. Bought his monster. I handed it over and said, "I'm glad you stopped in." He gave me a slightly confused look, then left. I watched him cross the lot and held on to the hope that those words had mattered, even if they couldn't matter the way I wanted them to. The girl from the truck never came back. I'm not going to say what I think that probably means. My last night, I stood in the parking lot before getting in my car and looked north up 84th for a while. The road went dark fast past the edge of the lights. The bend was out there somewhere, invisible. The ditch ran alongside it without protection, same as always. I thought about Vic, about what it must have taken to hollow a person out like that. Year after year of working that shift without understanding what was in front of him. The significance of it just sliding off him every night until there was nothing left but motion. I didn't want that to be me. I went back inside, finished my count, and left. Years later, I still think about that summer more than almost anything else from that time in my life. The biker's eyes are what I keep coming back to. Not the horror of it, not the footage, just the moment he stopped and looked at me. The one person who'd run out into the dark and called after him. He didn't have to do that. He could have just driven away. Instead, he took a moment. For me. For the one person who saw him. I've tried to be that person since. The one who sees people. Who looks up. Who makes the small effort of acknowledging that whoever's in front of them is real and matters and isn't invisible. Not always successfully. But more than I used to. Because of a flickering sign and a dead man's eyes. One time I drove past the Pass and Go late at night, a few months after I'd quit. Slowed down as I went by. There was someone behind the counter, young, leaning on the register, looking at their phone. The sign in the window was flickering. I drove faster and didn't look back. I hope they looked up. I hope they saw who was there. My mom used to hide under my bed at night. I was born in 2000, grew up in a small town in Northeast Ohio. We had one of those little ranch-style houses, all on one floor, 3 bedrooms. It was just me and my mom for most of my life. My dad left when I was a baby. She was a good mom, from what I remember. We didn't have much money, but she made sure I always had what I needed. She worked as a waitress at a restaurant in the center of town. Always tired, but always kind. We'd watch movies together at night. She'd tuck me in, kiss my forehead, and tell me she loved me. I felt safe. Except at bedtime. I must have been about 6 or 7 the first time I noticed it. One night after she tucked me in, I heard the floor creak after she turned off the light. Not out in the hall, right by my bed. I remember freezing, listening. Then I heard the sound of her breathing. Slow, heavy, right underneath me. I leaned over the edge and whispered, "Mom?" She didn't answer. Just this soft little giggle. Not mean, not playful, just weird. I called for her louder. After a few seconds, she crawled out from under the bed like it was the most normal thing in the world, smiled at me and said, "Go to sleep, sweetheart. Mommy's here." Then she left the room. The next night, same thing. I heard her crawl under right after lights out. The soft thud of her knees and hands against the floorboards, the shift of the mattress as she settled in. Then the breathing. I was too little to really question it. I thought maybe it was just a game she liked to play. But the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't a game. It became a routine. She'd tuck me in like normal, turn off the light, and then she'd get under the bed. Every single night. And then she started doing little things. She would tap on the wood under my mattress in these odd rhythms. 3 taps, then 2, then 4. Sometimes it sounded almost like a song, other times like random patterns. If I moved or sat up, she'd stop until I lay back down. A couple times, I caught her peeking out from the foot of the bed. I'd feel eyes on me and look down, and there she was. Her face just visible in the dark, one eye glinting in the faint light from the hall. No expression, just watching. I stopped sleeping well. I'd lie stiff under the covers, too afraid to move or call for her. If I tried to leave the bed, she'd grab my ankle. Not hard, just enough to stop me. Then she'd giggle again. That same soft, weird giggle. I never told anyone. How do you explain something like that when you're a kid? I figured no one would believe me. It wasn't every night that something scary happened. Some nights she'd just lie there quietly. I'd hear her whispering to herself sometimes. Words I couldn't make out, soft and steady, like she was talking to someone I couldn't hear. This went on for years. During the day, she was totally normal. Made my lunch, helped with homework, joked with me, hugged me. I remember trying to work up the courage to ask her about it once when I was around 10. I said something dumb like, "Mom, why do you sleep under my bed?" She just blinked at me and smiled. "Oh, buddy, I don't do that. You must be having silly dreams." But that night, she was there again, and the tapping was louder. By the time I was 9 or 10, I stopped looking under the bed. I started sleeping on the couch when I could get away with it. Eventually, when I turned 11, she told me I was old enough to have a lock on my door. She never came back into my room. I don't know why she did it. I don't know what changed. She passed away when I was 23. Cancer. In her last weeks, she was confused a lot of the time, drifting in and out. But one night, when I was sitting by her bed, she grabbed my wrist and said very clearly, "I kept you safe, you know. You were never alone at night." I still don't understand what she meant.